Hey, Piscopo in the morning. Let's get into it. A lot to talk about this morning. I always appreciate when Frank Gaffney jumps on with us. He's president of the Center for Security Policy and former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Frank, welcome back to the show, my friend. How you doing this morning?
Terrific, Joe. Good to be with you.
Well, listen, we look for the translators. We're trying to break down the news. Frank, it's unbelievable. You see what they put out, what the PR machines in Washington puts out, what the swamp puts out. We like to make sense of it all. Can I go right to what happened with Israel and Syria? Do you have any inside information that we should know about with that cross-border clash between Iranian and Syrian forces, and how the drone went over Israel? What the heck happened over there, Frank?
I don't have any inside information, but I can point out to you what's, I think, blatantly obvious about this, but has been mostly overlooked by the commentary to date, and that is Iran is preparing for war with Israel. And what it is doing is using proxies on the ground in the areas immediately adjacent to Israel. This particular episode was on the sort of northeast border, but the other place that is just, a time bomb preparing to go off is the other northern border of Israel, namely with Lebanon. And in both of these places, Joe, what the Iranians have been systematically doing, both in their own right, increasingly, by putting their forces on the ground in Syria closer and closer and closer to Israel, but also through their proxies, Hezbollah, the terrorist organization that now runs much of, if not virtually all of Lebanon, certainly the southern parts of Lebanon, is preparing this vast arsenal of offensive weaponry, rockets, missiles, some of them increasingly precise guided missiles at that. By some estimates, 150,000 of them in Lebanon alone, prepared to rain down death and destruction all across Israel. And what they've also done, Joe, which is especially worrying, is they've turned areas that they control into seas of potential human sacrifice. They've put in place villages of people who are going to be human shields for their offensive operations against Israel at some point. And, of course, when Israel does what it's going to have to do to try to prevent the widespread death and destruction these guys have in mind for their people, is going to be seen by many, predictably, as war crimes ridden, attack on innocent civilians. This is predictable. It's being teed up. I expect that what we're going to say in hindsight is what went down this weekend was the opening round in that war that is coming, I'm afraid.
Frank Gaffney, that's why we love you, man. Thank you so much. You know what? I don't even see an inkling. What you just explained in such an astute manner, Frank, no one's talking about it, man. You know what they're talking about, Frank? Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, and how she outshined Vice President Trump. How do we let this go? How do we let this go? This to me was so serious. Everything that you said, this is serious business, and we're going to be right in the middle of it, Frank, yes?
Well, our ally, our most important ally in the Middle East, by far, in my estimation, is going to be right in the middle of it. And to some extent, yes, we will too. We've got troops on the ground in Syria. We've got forces that are periodically visiting with and supporting our friends in Israel. So, yeah, and more broadly, I mean, look, Iran is on the march. It's not just in Syria, sadly, or it's not just against Israel. It has meant since 1979, this regime of Ayatollahs, Joe.
Yes, sir.
When they say death to America as well. And you're looking at a region that is going to be made vastly more dangerous for us and our interests, as well as perhaps our own homeland, thanks in part, let's be clear, to what Barack Obama did to enrich as well as to embolden the mullahs of Iran with that so-called, I call it the Obama bomb deal that he crafted during his tenure.
I was just going to ask you that, Frank Gaffney with Piscopo in the morning. Frank, this emboldens Iran to make these moves because of that deal that Obama cut, yes?
Unquestionably. And sadly, it's not just, again, in this particular space. You know, what we're seeing with their terrorism, their regional hegemonistic ambitions, Joe, is just one aspect of this. With the help, you mentioned North Korea a moment ago, with the help of their strategic allies in North Korea, the Iranians are making inexorably steady progress towards not only having longer and longer range ballistic missiles, and in due course it's inevitable to have of sufficient range to reach us, but they're also continuing to beaver away. You can take this to the bank on the nuclear weapons that are designed to go aboard those missiles. Yeah. We can't get in to see them in the places that they're deeply buried, that are off limits to inspectors. The inspectors don't even ask because they don't want to be told no, but it's going on, and again, your money in part has paid for that kind of activity, just as it is this threat to Israel.
You know, Frank, I want to talk about North Korea, but just staying on this for a while, because this is vital information that you're telling us about here. What is the solution? What's the end game? How can we deal with this? Because what a mess in Syria, man. What an absolute mess. How do you deal with Iran and now Israel in such danger? And with this deal, the president said, okay, we're going to keep it in place for a while. What in your estimation, Frank Gaffney, would bring some peace in that region?
Well, look, there's only one thing that can be done that will actually alleviate the danger that the Iranian regime represents, and that is to get rid of the Iranian regime. And here's the great tragedy, Joe. Again, I was indicting Barack Obama and his administration for what they did to prop up and legitimate and perpetuate that regime. In the process, as you know, he spurned an outpouring of popular sentiment against the regime. Now, some of that has manifested itself again, I think even more authentically and clearly hostile to the mullahs who have been really doing incredible harm to that country under the name of, their Sharia supremacist agenda, both domestically and internationally. And what I think we've got to be doing is standing with those people of Iran and doing absolutely everything we can to help them bring about the end of this regime. I believe, as is often the case, Joe, that these totalitarian systems are frequently fragile in a way that they don't want you to understand or perceive. And I think were the Obama administration to have done this in the past and the Trump administration to do it now, to systematically work to help undermine and bring down this regime instead of legitimating and perpetuating it, you might actually see relief for the people of that country and for the region, and again, for us as well.
Yeah, Frank Gaffney, president of the Center for Security Policy, former Assistant Secretary of Defense. I'll tell you, Frank, love having you on the show, man. Please stay close, keep us posted, and come back soon. Would you do that?
Always happy to. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Frank Gaffney right there.